So, on behalf of the Baha'i Chair for Studies in Development at Devi Vishwavidyalaya, Indore, I would like to welcome our distinguished speaker for today, Dr. Debal Deb, and all our participants who are joining us for this lecture on the topic Anthropogenic Expansion of Biodiversity and its erosion by agricultural development. This lecture is being organized by the Baha'i Chair as part of the series titled Dialogues on Development, and it is being shared on both Zoom and on YouTube. Facebook. Um, I'll just share a brief bio sketch of Dr. Deb before handing over to him to enlighten us with his thoughts. Dr. Deb is a biologist with a doctorate in ecology from Calcutta University. He conducted postdoctoral research in human ecology of estuarine resource use at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and in ecological economics at the University of California at Berkeley as a Ford Foundation Fellow in 2001 and as a Fulbright Fellow in 2009. In 1997, Dr. Deb founded Vrihi, India's largest open source rice seed bank, conserving 1,440 folk rice varieties. He also founded a conservation farm called Vasudha. Dr. Deb has analyzed in his laboratory for the first time the nutraceutical properties of numerous uncultivated food plants and hundreds of rice varieties. His research in agroecology, crop genetic diversity, forest ecology, and ecological economics have been widely published in international journals. Friends, without taking more time, I would like to welcome Dr. Deb to share his comments with us. Before I hand over to him, I would like to inform our participants that after Dr. Deb makes his comments, there will be time to take your comments and questions. So please post your comments and your questions on the Q&A box, and we will take them once his presentation is over. Over to you, Dr.
So, essentially, my presentation will be to discuss the general general presumption that humans are the culprit in the ecocidal crime on the earth, destroying biodiversity and so on. So I'm going to pose an opposite viewpoint. And of course, there is no doubt that there are uh, anthropogenic reasons for biodiversity loss and ecosystem destruction, habitat loss, and so on. But at the same time, another feature of the role of human in the course of evolution is neglected or not at all discussed in conservation arena, is that it's the humans who also fostered and increased the range of biodiversity by their own activity. So, and of course, at the same time, they have also destroyed some of this diversity in the modern times by agricultural development. So I'll primarily focus on agroecology, agricultural science, but at the same time, in the background, I'll definitely discuss the other ones. As in the next slide, please. So uh, but we know that when with Sir Attenborough and others, they always in all the presentations on the different kinds of television series and writings, popular articles, they always blame humanity, the human species as a whole, to be the responsible and the culprit for ecocidal activities. Yeah, that is killing of ecosystems, killing of biodiversity, loss of. So, and the assumption is that if only we eliminated all humans from Earth, then the biodiversity could be saved. And then among these humans, there's also another school that assume that the native forest people who actually are hunter gatherers, because the fact that they are hunters and gathering on the forest resources, so they must be the culprit. They are the enemies to wildlife. So wildlife is, this is actually what Ramachandra Guha and Professor Gadgil has remarked. This is the elite urban conservationist view. So wildlife is there for picnicking in the forest and taking a photograph of a tiger smiling and all of these bird lovers and all this. But and therefore the people who are disturbing, who are killing a bird for livelihood, or cutting a tree for their livelihood, are the enemies to nature. That kind of viewpoint is always there. So it's the American model of conservation, that nature in one place completely bereft of all human touch. That's called nature conservation, like Yosemite National Park and Yellowstone National Park. That's the American model, uh, according to John Muir and others. But in Asia and Africa, nature was never thought like that. We still have every part of nature has human interactions all the time. Uh, so that next one, please. So this is the myth and the beliefs of the popular myths in the next slide. So before we go ahead, we just now make a very preliminary understanding of biodiversity, as the biologists discuss. When we talk of biodiversity, we have to be aware of the different levels of biodiversity. So one is the ecosystem level. Then, I mean, that could be marine ecosystem, forest ecosystem, desert ecosystem, agro ecosystem, and so on. Then there's taxic, that is taxon level. So different taxons. So class, order, is mammals and is an order. Sorry, I mean reptilia and others. These are class, and then order, mammals and as a class, and then within that, there would be orders. Then there's families, there's species, subspecies. These are the taxonomic groups. So, for example, the class Avis is the bird, all the birds in the class. Then mammal is a class, reptiles is a class, within which there would be orders, and and this order is comprised of many species taken together. And then species under species, there will be subspecies too. And then within the subspecies, now within the species, there will be genetic diversity also. So genetic level. So uh, so rice, we have different breeds of dogs, for example. That's the easiest one. So the dog belongs to one single species, but we have thousand breeds of dogs. So Dalmatian and Chihuahua and all of these, you name it. Similarly, for rice, is the same species, Oryza sativa, but we have different varieties of rice, Govindabhog and Basmati and Navara. All of these, they are the genetic diversity within the species. Now, so when you talk of biodiversity, it could be on any of these taxons. And when we say that the species is extinct, then it's at the taxic level. When a habitat is lost, like a sacred grove or a forest, deforestation, then the entire ecosystem is lost. Then when some varieties of rice or breeds of dog become extinct, that's at the genetic level, although the species may be not extinct. Next one, please. So with this understanding, we proceed to the classical Eurocentric myth of wilderness. It's the myth of wilderness was actually created in the 18th century, early 18th century, if not before, and that's been severely criticized by ecologists and biodiversity experts in this previous, 20th century onwards. The essential myth is that wilderness is separate from and above human civilization. So when we talk of civilization, it is definitely different from and above wilderness. So when you talk about nature conservation, that's the usual way we conserve nature. That means we are separate, different from, and above nature. We are not part of nature. So we are conserving nature. That means nature is another entity outside us. beyond, I mean, below us. So we are the authority to conserve nature or destroy nature. That kind of epistemological distancing and hierarchization of nature versus human, or nature below human category or civilization category, is uh, the the presumptive premise of wilderness. So when we talk about nature or wilderness, it's usually in 19th early 19th century, it was always called she. So it was man above woman, Europe above non-Europe, civilization above wild nature, and therefore it's man's, that is civilized man's task, it's divinely ordained task to conquer nature, to tame nature, to subjugate nature. So nature is there, out there, to be subjugated and conquered for the human benefit. That positing of the wide wilderness and the imagination of wilderness, which is outside the pale of civilization, is that civilization is a much more refined uh, entity, which is human characteristic. And wilderness is no whoever lives in the forest or around the forest are actually savage people, barbarian people. They're not civilized, uncivilized people, whether they are Africans or Mesoamerican tribes or Indians. They were because they belong to non-European. This was the kind of model that's been elaborately discussed over history by and the basis of Orientalism. That was the concept of this. So when it was imposed on the ecological thinking, that gives a lot of problem in policy making too. Next one, please. uh, so we're going to make this note with that assumption. The assumption again, another, I mean, it's an outcome of that previous assumption, is that in the Pleistocene, which is the period when humans as a species arose, came to be born evolutionarily. So during this Pleistocene, all the other mammals, big mammals like mammoths and others, rhinoceros. In India, there was rhinoceros too, uh, and all the others were actually pushed to extinction by overkill, overhunting, and many of these, the forests or grasslands, many species in the grasslands went to extinction because of overgrazing by the cattle and others, like grazing animals. So this recently, over these last 20 years, evidence is accumulating to dismantle that kind of myth, that this overkill, the assumption of over, or the hypothesis of overkill leading to extinction, is without much evidence. Rather, in all the recent publications, we see that most of these extinctions, which were earlier presumed to be due to overhunting or overkilling, are now known to be because of climatic factors, changes in climatic factors, that is glaciation, for example, the ice age and others, and desertification process, not because of human things. It's simply geological climatic changes that had eroded many of, and also forest fire, for example. It was not caused by humans. It's natural cycles of forest fire. Those were the primary reasons for most of these extinctions that we always used to assumed to be because of overkill. Next one, please. So I'm just sharing you with you two such important publications, both in Nature. One was early, I mean, in January 91, that was, by Mace, and there are several publications in Nature in that issue. Overgrazing, that was an overstatement. And this year, as another example on the right hand side, this study actually showed that this is definitely not the, uh, it was not because of the overkill at all. So they show that, excuse me, uh, sorry, um, just one minute, it's not jumping. Yeah, so it is, you can, I hope you can read uh, the text there, although it's very small, but essentially the right hand side says that all the evidence, current evidence, is consistent with the climate driven animal habitat shifts impacting the natural abundances of high ranking prey species on the landscape, rather than human induced resource depletion. So that's the most recent paper. This year it was published. So I'm taking this now, the range of publications exemplified by this 91 paper and 2023 papers. Next one, please. So uh, the blame on human as the destroyer, the eliminator, is not really founded on solid evidence ground, uh, archaeological or evolutionary ground. In fact, now there is absolutely no evidence. I mean, rather the contrary evidence that over the past 5,000 years, there is no extinction of animals or plants until the early 19th, I mean, late 19th century, which is the advent of modern technology or industrial revolution onwards. So, over the past maybe 200 years, 250 years or so, that was the beginning of man made extinction amply recorded. Until that time, over the past 5,000 years, that is beginning of the Indus Valley civilization, Egyptian civilization, Babylonian civilization, etc. We don't have any evidence of any extinction of animal or plant. Next one, please. So there has been umpteen number of studies, archaeological and anthropological studies, paleoarchaeological studies, paleoanthropological studies, and the conclusions by all these authorities indicate that studies in Asia, North America, South America, and Africa. They say that, for example, all Asian environmental ills are either caused by Western technology or aggravated by it. Burke was actually documenting this, the all the kinds of in the Americas, in both Americas, and they recorded that when the European trade began in the new Americas, uh, after the so-called discovery of the continents, the European trade began with the for flower and animals and all of these. And this trade actually had replaced group hunting for subsistence by the indigenous people, the Native Americans. And this replacement of trade, I mean, by trade of this group hunting, it became individual hunting. They were also empowered by rifles and steel traps, and that led to extermination of game animals. That happened only after the European contact. Until that, none of the animals went extinct. So the timing, and then Jackson's study was about the Pacific marine animals. About 23 marine animals they studied about the history, and they discovered that the timing of the enormous losses of marine diversity, both in terms of biodiversity, I mean, number of species, and in terms of number of animals per species in the Americas and the Pacific, closely tracks European colonization and exploitation in most cases. It was never by the indigenous, I mean, native hunting, native fishery practices until the advent of the European colonization. So, next one, please. So, these actually dismantle the myth of this pristine wilderness destroyed by humans is not true. Of course, it is no which humans, not the Native Americans, not the Native Africans, but the European traders, the European colonists. So when we say humans are the cause, we actually, it's a partial truth. We the statement actually conceals the fact that it's one portion of humanity who colonized this earth, who capitalized this natural capital of the native people, who were the culprit, not every human, not the native people who were responsible for this kind of extermination of this wildlife, which formed the basis of their livelihood systems. So this is another from this. So hunting, for example, when we talk of native hunting systems, we always think of there is not a single hunting gathering society on earth who hunt an extra individual animal for their livelihood. It's always to satisfy their hunger, the community's health system. But pleasure hunting just for uh, you know uh, uh, you can say fortuitous hunting, fortuitous killing, or gratuitous killing, that never happens. It only happened with the imperial hunting system. The imperial hunting in India, for example, this became an initiation ceremony for British men. Game hunting, see, the term was game hunting. So hunting was not a livelihood, it was a game. The rifle that was used to kill the animals was called sporting rifle. So these this usage, the semiotic usage of game, sport, was a European invention. None of the tribals that I have been working with, 16 tribes in India and America and China, none of them call this hunting as a game or sport. It's a livelihood option. So this game hunting, is not, the game hunting is not meant for food collection, but for the expression of the valor of the civilized people. So uh, there are many, many examples. Beinart was giving, who studied this, in South Africa. He recorded 600 heads of large game alone were shot in one day by the imperial hunters. Similarly, in India, there were two single day shoots that these are the world record holders in Bharatpur Bird Sanctuary. Today is the bird sanctuary in Rajasthan. And in Bharatpur, in 1916, on the viceregal visit of Lord Chelmsford, 4,206 birds were killed on one single day shoot. And again, in 1938, Viceroy's visit, that was Lord Linlithgow, that was 4,273 birds were killed on a single day shoot to celebrate the viceregal visit. And that was a valor. And when we actually collected some of the folk tales, the folklore in Bharatpur among the tribals there, and they still remember, reminisce that kind of incident, that after that single day shoot, for 15 days people were unable to enter that wetland because of the stink. Thousands of birds stinking there, rotting there, because obviously Lord Chelmsford or Lord Linlithgow and their coterie, their edicongs, couldn't have eaten all the thousands of birds. There may be a few dozens or so, but all these thousands of birds were rotting in the wetland. So this is the and we but we don't call them uh, we don't call them the destruction, because it was civilized game. Uh, but any hunting by one or two birds by the native people would be considered savage extinction of the animals. Next one, please. Uh, so when we talk about then it was the industrial development, which many of the ecological economists consider a super ideology, because everyone believes that without development we cannot be civilized enough. So development, in this case, in industrial development, technological development, with its efficient technologies, and this efficiency essentially means how fast you can deplete a resource, you know, uh, and how exhaustively. So to exhaust the resource, for example, an efficient fishing craft would be one which would enhance the catch per unit time, catch per unit effort. So a traditional fisher might be catching, say, 200 fish per effort, but today's trawler or purseine technology might catch 20,000 fish in one effort, and therefore, by that definition, it is more efficient. So this efficiency, technological efficiency, is totally opposite to the ecological efficiency, because it doesn't take care of the sustainability of the resource. Is actually geared to exhaust the resource as fast as possible, as quickly as possible, and to get the benefit as quickly as possible at the expense of the resource base altogether. There's no consideration of the sustainability of the resource base. So this techno-industrial development, that has caused the massive loss of biodiversity. But that is not unique to capitalist societies alone. Of course, the capitalist societies, including ours, is we are focusing on this techno-industrial development. So we are the deforestation is the norm for mining or cement factory and all of these. But it's not just the capitalist development; it's also in this called Soviet socialism, Chinese socialism. They also made the same thing. It's equally visible. The killing of the Amudarya and Sirdarya river in Soviet Union, and the with the drainage, and the one third, two-third of the Aral Sea being died out. That also happened because of the industrial development. In China, this massive use of pesticides and deforestation was one of the top rate in the world. So it doesn't matter with this, the capitalism or socialism. It's the industrial ethic the industrial development. That was the main thing, technological and industrial development. And there's been, dozens and dozens of examples in every country. Next one, please. Uh, Earlier, when we come to agriculture, agriculture is called agricultural revolution that took place between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago from now. This that actually demarcated the domestication of crops and animals and the method of food production, controlled food production uh, in place of forest. But the earliest production system, that was the earliest agroecology or agroforestry, was actually by definition is agroforestry. It was in alongside or inside the forest itself, and the remnant of this what we see as shifting cultivation in the forest areas. And that was the pinnacle example of multiple cropping system. It was not one crop at a time in one go. There were many up to 200 crop species, crops and non-crop plants were grown in those traditional cropping systems. So I myself have recorded these home gardens, for example, in Meghalaya, Kerala, Mizoram, Nagaland, and South Bengal, where from 30 to 220 different crop species are grown on the same cropland or farmland in the same year. And it's not just food species, it could be medicinal, it could be fodder species, structural elements like bamboos and so on, and also the species which are companion crops to foster this the cultivation. These systems were called the agroforestry systems because they took place inside the forest, clearing a patch of the forest by burning and charring, uh, creating black earth, what we call the Amazon. In Amazon, it was called terra preta. So these were actually measured. Now, this could be a new information to most of our uh, participants here, to learn that what we now call Amazonian rainforest is not, and all the previous centuries, people used to consider this is an example of so-called virgin forest, pristine forest, and so on. But this was not never a pristine forest. Rather, the Amazonian rainforest is a result of 10,000 years of agroforestry by Inca Maya agroforesters. It's a result, a direct outcome of 10,000 years of agroforestry. They actually consciously, people actually consciously planted hundreds of trees. They added the biodiversity by planting those trees, and then again different kinds of animals we invaded. And then after 10,000 years we see what we call now called the pristine. And biggest evidence that was discovered in 1970s with the terra preta. Terra preta literally means black earth. So the topsoil of this Amazonian rainforest up to about 2 meters deep for 10,000 years was black earth because they were burnt and char, what we call now biochar. And now, today, we know that biochar is one of the most important component in agroecology to fertilize the soil and so on. So, Amazonian rainforest is so fertile. It's primarily because of that terra preta, black earth, because of this, the burning of this one. Similarly, this, the Guinea Republic in Africa, they had this, the mosaic of forest and savanna. For 200 years, forest department's literature, ecological studies, and school curricula all taught that this is a result of destruction of a pristine forest, and because of this profligate use of that forest, that has come down to a very degraded kind of savanna and forest mosaic. Only 30 years ago, the interdisciplinary study by archaeologists and forest said that is exactly the opposite. It was a desert about 5,000 years ago. And from the desert, in that desert, these native Guinea people consciously planted the tree. As a result of after thousands of years, we see the forest savannas. So it's exactly opposite direction. This forest savanna complex is not a result of desert into a forest. So whether this, the agriculture and activity and achievement of the early humans. Next one, then there was no forest into agriculture. We also have the agroforestry or the shifting cultivations and so on. In these, mixed cropping systems, you have multiple species agroforestry. There are up to 5 grasses and herbs and shrubs and climbers. So this photograph is actually terrestrial ecosystem with many species on the terrestrial crops, plus the aquatic ecosystem where we have fish and duck and crab and shellfish and paddy. Unfortunately, I cannot show you the rice growing on in the pond, because when I arrived there, I actually gave the rice variety that grows in this deep water pond that was just harvested. But this the same ecosystem, aquatic ecosystem, where you get a range of food things, so rice and fish and crab and duck's eggs, duck's meat, all of these are the models of food sustainability. So in case of any kind of disaster, uh, you are certain to get at least one source of food from this, from both from the aquatic and the terrestrial systems. Next one, please. So this when with the industrialization of agriculture or modernization of agriculture, epitomized in the so-called green revolution that we know, in that was the advent was in the late 1960s. With that, the traditional agroforestry and the multiple cropping system was all replaced with monoculture. So acres and acres of rice, acres and acres of wheat. That is the model of monoculture in the green revolution, combined with synthetic pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, and so on. So all of these, the effect of toxic chemicals on this, the organisms and the soil organisms and the insects and the vertebrates that that prey on these, the pest insects and so on, the entire ecosystem was killed, changed. The composition was changed completely, and also the crop diversity itself. Instead of this multiple cropping system, it became on monoculture. So that was another kind of the toxic removal at the toxic level, and also the genetic level, because instead of multiple varieties that are still being cultivated in Koraput district, for example, or in Nagaland and many other states, where a farmer actually grows multiple varieties of rice, for example, or multiple varieties of corn, multiple varieties of millets in the same farm. So there again, the green revolution model of agriculture industrialization, in addition to the chemical elimination of other species extinction, uh, there is also the homogenization of genetic diversity. So it's only one variety. So whether it's IR36 or IR72 or PT20 of this, the maize variety and so on, this is one single variety. So that's at the genetic level again. Uh, Biodiversity is cropped, it's truncated severely. So this drastic reduction in this agroecosystem complexity is a result of this modernization of agriculture or development of agriculture. Next one, please. So can we change to the next, please? Yeah. So now we know that these humans have become custodians of biodiversity. One was, of course, by maintaining these ecosystems, by fostering different kinds of food production systems like shifting cultivation and agroforestry, and hunting gathering systems which took care of very stringent restraints on overkilling. Uh, no hunter was allowed to kill a pregnant doe, for example, or an excess of eggs from the bird's nest. They must leave some of these things. Mushrooms cannot be exhausted from a bed. They must keep residual portion of this mushroom for the next collector. These were the constraints, cultural constraints for thousands of years that had maintained this, the biodiversity as the custodian. But in addition to that, next one, please. We have in agriculture also, when we are tamed, we have these ecosystems, as I already explained. The Amazonian rainforest is a new ecosystem that did not exist before. It's a completely new ecosystem that was created by conscious planting of trees over 10,000 years and the management of this creation of terra preta. The Guinea savanna forest mosaic that I just discussed, that was created, which was not there. It was a desert area, and now it's a completely new savanna forest mosaic, which was created by humans. Next one, please. So it's enhancement of biodiversity at the ecosystem level. Then humans also created new species. Those species were not created by God nor created by natural selection, okay, of evolution. They were created by artificial selection. This is the term that Darwin always used. Artificial selection by these Holocene humans in the Holocene, 10 to 12,000. Now, first among them was a dog. That was selected from Canis lupus, which is the Eurasian wolf. But from this species, over thousands of years, by experimentation, selection, and breeding, humans created a new species altogether, Canis lupus. Now, this Canis lupus familiaris is a subspecies, but actually, many authorities don't consider this as a subspecies. It's a completely new species, Canis lupus, Canis familiaris itself, not Canis lupus. It's not a subspecies of wolf anymore. One example is that when you when the dogs become feral, that means wild, they left in the wild. What exactly happened in Australia with the dingo? The dingo is a feral dog, but even after centuries of remaining feral, none of this dingo look like a wolf. They never behave like a wolf. They are not wolf anymore longer. So they remain as a dingo, with exactly the dog characteristics. So now taxonomists consider this Canis familiaris as a new species altogether, which never existed on Earth until 14,000 years ago. Similarly, horse, Equus caballus. This caballus was no, was it's a this was selected and bred with multiple progenitor species. There were at least three progenitor species of this modern horse. There were wild horses, different species in different countries. The finally this Equus caballus never existed before until about 9,000 years ago. Similarly, with the cultivated rice, the progenitor species of rice was Oryza rufipogon in China. Uh, but now Oryza sativa is a completely new species which never existed in the wild before. Even today, it never exists in the wild. It's always cultivated. It's a new species altogether. Now, these sorghum, banana, you consider any of the cultivated species, any of the domesticated animals, they're all new species which never existed before. That's the creation of by humans. So humans had added biodiversity by creating new species. Next one, please. And not only new species, also new subspecies. The donkey, for example, Equus asinus was the original one, the progenitor wild species. Then through selection and breeding, we have the domesticated donkey, Equus asinus asinus. Chicken, all chickens of the world were domesticated, are originated from the Indian red jungle fowl, Gallus gallus. Now, all this chicken that we eat today all over the world is a subspecies, Gallus gallus domesticus, which was domesticated from the wild red jungle fowl. Emmer wheat, tea, everything from this, so these subspecies are the creation by humans. They never existed before. And when we say this subspecies, not just a subsection of the population of the original species, it was also a result of creation of many kinds of gene complexes, gene combinations, which were not found in the original progenitor species. That's called creation, the C species. Next one, please. And then we have this is just a list of this very exemplary list of this how many species, uh, where they were domesticated, and approximate time, how many years before present they were domesticated. So dog was roughly 14,000 years ago. They were domesticated in the Near East. Cow, Indian cow is Bos indicus. The progenitor species was Bos gaurus, our gaur, Indian gaur. And Indus Valley was the originator of that one 5,000 years ago. Then, so Bactrian camel, horse, llama in South America, Andean Valley, silk moth that was in China 4,100 years ago. The ancestor is now extinct, but now we have this domesticated silk moth, Bombyx mori, which is a completely new species that didn't exist before. Next one, please. Similarly, for the plants, we have this. No, one before, please. Yeah. So we have this, the rice, the Japonica rice that is grown in China, Japan, Korea, and Indica rice, which is grown in India, Bangladesh, entire South Asia and the Philippines and Thailand. So they had 8,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, einkorn wheat and bread wheat. That bread wheat was actually domesticated in Iraq 8,000 years ago. That was the Mesopotamian civilization. That's another in the Fertile Crescent, one seat of civilization. And then corn in Mexico, that was the place of origin 8,000 years ago. Barley, sorghum. I mean, you can, this is just a very snippet of this, very small number. There were 220 crops were domesticated over the last 10,000 years, and 70 different animals were domesticated over the last. So it's just a snippet of what humans had achieved by creating new species and new subspecies. Now, after domestication, I mean, after creation of that new species, next one, please, we humans also made novel genetic diversity. I mean, different breeds, different varieties by selection of novel traits. Some of the traits didn't exist in the progeny species at all. They were created by controlled selection. So next one, please. So one example, I mean, the best example is the rice. We have, and dog also. So we have currently we have documented about 6,000 breeds of dog. There were earlier, something like 20,000 breeds of dog earlier. Now most of them are extinct, but even 6,000 breeds of dog, and this is the enormous, the fantastic magnification of this genetic diversity of special genetic traits. The smallest of these dog breeds is the Chihuahua, the Chinese dog, which can fit in my shirt pocket. But the largest size of the dog is Borzoi, the Siberian Borzoi, which is like a small cow. So that range from this tiny dog, Chihuahua to Borzoi, all belong to the same species of dog, Canis familiaris. This amazing genetic diversity was created by humans too. uh, that is not natural selection, of course. It's artificial selection over centuries and centuries of intelligent selection and breeding. Uh, Even today's, you can see this dog breeders and bird breeders. They are very careful not to mix these breeds. Once there's a mixed breed or mongrel, they are of less value. So the pure breeds are extremely valuable because pure breeds actually retain the original genetic setup of that particular breed, which distinguish them from any other breed in the world. Similarly, next one. Uh, I mean, this is true for all. Is we have coconut diversity in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. We have so many of these coconut varieties. Some are particularly important for the meat, the food portion. Some contain lot of water, the coconut milk. Uh, so water content, meat content, and then the fiber content. There are certain varieties you can see them in the middle row, uh, extreme left, is very important for the coir rope making, because they have long fibers. So the coir rope is easiest and the toughest of these. They have long fibers. So coir rope makers prefer that particular variety, and so on. So then on the right hand side is the potato variety from Chile. All kinds of 12,000 varieties of potato. We are only using just a handful of those varieties all over the world, but there are 12,000 varieties now. Most of these are being extinct because of the green revolution. Next one, please. We have aubergine varieties from West Bengal alone, about 35 different varieties. These are all grown on my farm as well. But in total, there are 150 varieties of eggplants all over India and Bangladesh. Next one, please. And then we have rice varieties. I mean, I'm not going into the detail of rice because I've been growing 1,440 varieties of rice every year on my farm. This is just a visual snippet of the diversity of color and size and different other properties. I cannot show you the aroma of this variety. How I cannot share with you what's the taste of this variety and this the flavor, but just this, the visual characters are so diverse. The on the top row is the hulled rice, raw rice, and the bottom row is the kernel. I mean, after you mill the rice, which we cook. So you can have the range of all these colors. The white rice, yellow, the ivory color, light brown, dark brown, purple, black, and so on. And then you see on the on the upper row, you'll find from the left is the eighth rice. Uh, on the top row, you find the wing-like structure around this one. This is the external, I mean, the sterile lemma. The length of this exceeded the length of the rice itself. This is a unique property, which is and the farmer who's growing, this is in Chhattisgarh, and the farmer is proudly growing that, not for any obvious agronomic benefit or taste. It's simply because it's so unique and he's proud that this unique variety I am growing. So that's the aesthetic things, the aesthetic value that the farmers assign to this kind of views. So this way, the morphological properties and agronomic properties, some are salt tolerant varieties, some are drought tolerant, some are flood tolerant, some are pest resistant, and so on. Apart from that, there is also different colors, the length of on, and different kinds of bizarre things. So next one, please. So there's one such character of one rice. This is another unique rice variety. You can see this. After you mill the rice, you get the kernels, which are embryo like shaped. This is technically called the notched belly. The rice has a notched belly. So even if you cook the rice, the cooked rice also will have this kind of notched belly. This is a unique property, and these are found only in about 12 to 13 varieties of rice in my collection. And the farmers are maintaining the genetic diversity so that it's a pure line. So every grain of that rice plant will have this kind of property. That means the farmers had selected consciously over generations, over centuries, to maintain that character every generation, which was not found in the wild progenitor. It was a farmer's creation, and it's not found in any other variety. Next one, please. We share with another pride and joy of me. Uh, this is a rice variety which contains three grains in its every rice has one grain. This has three grains, triple grain rice variety. It's sateen. Sateen in Bengali, this is from Bengal. You can see this one on the left hand side. You can see this. We have removed the upper part of that one to show the three grains. I mean, three kernels peeping out. And when you release it, there are three grains. In Bengal, they are called sateen, which literally means co-wives. In the middle, there is a husband flanked by two wives, all living happily in the same room. Now, this is not my name. I mean, I'm not given the name. Feminists could name it, co-husbands. Why not? But anyway, the fact is that this is a dream. I mean, beyond the dream of genetic engineers, that to create three grains, three kernels in the same rice grain, same spikelet. But the farmers, about a century ago, unknown rice scientists developed it. They did not know what DNA is. They didn't know about the enzymes about this, but they achieved it, what today's genetic engineers cannot. Only very recently we have published this, the identity of the gene which is responsible for over duplication that creates this. But this is a very recent one, recent discovery that we published about 2 years ago. Next one, please. Uh, this is one discovery that we made a few years ago. This is the only rice variety that we discovered in the world which contains silver in its grains. And the quantity is 15.7 ppm. Silver, and we didn't actually look for silver at all. It's a serendipitous discovery. We were only screening for heavy metals like iron and zinc, but this particular variety is the only one in the world which contains silver, considerable amount. And it so happens that this variety was known in Bengal as a medicinal rice to cure gastroenteric diseases, any kind of gastroenteric diseases, diarrhea, dysentery, amoebiasis, giardiasis. You take one meal of this rice and it's cured. Now we know why. It's because of the nanoparticles of silver which kills all the gut pathogens in one go. That's why it used to cure. Now, those people didn't know whether it was silver or any other thing. The empirical knowledge was that it is curative. And now we prove it after maybe centuries that this is the reason. So these are the creations by unnamed farmer scientists who never knew about this physiology or the genetics of this. Next one, please. Now we have, so those were the creations, those were the additions to biodiversity on different levels: ecosystem level, genetic level, species level, subspecies level. Those were the creations by humans. So it was not that humans were only destroyers, they also created so many of these biodiversity elements on so many different levels. But at the same time, the second episode of toxic and genetic bottleneck took place with the industrial development in agriculture, epitomized by the Green Revolution, as we already mentioned. Next one, please. So in the next slide, we show this. No, this is we know this is the ecocidal thing. This is an aerial photograph of Indonesian rainforest. See this dense canopy of this forest, and now in the left corner you can see this. No, the left half is clear shaved. It's a clean shaved forest for oil palm cultivation. That's industrial agriculture. That is causing the massive destruction, deforestation. Next one, please. And the result of this, the carbon dioxide emission, you can see this now for 800,000 years record. The carbon dioxide level never exceeded that level, 1950 level. That was, that was the peak over 800,000 years. Only after 1950s, it shot up that at level, never to go below that. And this is not because of the early humans, not because of the traditional humans or hunter gatherers. It's primarily because of the industrial ethic. Next one, please. So we have today the carbon dioxide level has been so high now, 400 ppm. This is actually an old slide. This was actually 4 years ago. 400 ppm is now the ceiling. The global carbon dioxide level is never below this 400. Today, in 2023, the, the ceiling is 440 ppm, nothing below it. Okay. That's the result of industrialization, what we call Anthropocene. Next one, please. Uh, that's our sign of development. This is just a snippet from USA. Every 5 minutes, 2 million plastic bottles are shed. That's a sign of development. And of course, with the 1 billion plus population in India, we are going to overshoot that anyway with the consumption, because we consider development by in terms of consumption of these resources. So every 5 minutes, 2 million beverage bottle in one country. That's a sign of development. And obviously, we get all this kind of ecocidal effects of this, not just plastics, but others. But with plastic alone, next one, please. We know in Delhi and Mumbai and Kolkata, we have hundreds of animals who die from consuming plastics. This is one bird. The whole stomach is full of all these plastic gadgets, plastic materials, and we're killing them. Next one, please. Not to mention the plastic beads and microplants. So the current extinction rate is actually 100 extinctions per million species per year, which is 1,000 times higher than the natural background rate of extinction. And this year and over the last few years, biologists and evolutionists have predicted that instead of 1,000 times higher, it's going to be 10,000 times higher in the coming months and coming years. That's the rate of extinction that we are. This is the mass extinction episode that is coming only next to the Permian extinction that we already, Cambrian extinction that we had experienced in geological past of the globe. Next one, please. And it's not just when we talk about not just the Amazonian rainforest deforestation or the Indonesian rainforest deforestation. In our own country, the government is actually allowing this 307 acre of forest land, which was sanctuary for power production. And which is not mentioned here is that last year only 140,000 hectare of forest was given over to Adani industry in Chhattisgarh for development, of course. So this is the second phase of industrial growth leading to ecocide. But we don't mention that. We, instead of blaming that, we always say it's humans who are responsible. All humanity, human species. Next one, please. Next one, please. Yeah. India had an estimated 110,000 rice varieties until 1970. So 1965 onwards, the Green Revolution was promoted, and by this time, over the past uh, 30 years, we have actually from these 110,000 varieties, we are left with no more than 6,000 land races. In our own farm, we are conserving only 1,440, but all over the Indian subcontinent, there are no more than 6,000 varieties left on farmers' fields out of these 110,000 varieties. So that's a massive genocide on this, the genetic diversity scale. That's because of the industrial development in agriculture, uh, by monoculture and extinction of these land races, which are, and many of these are not even collected in the national gene banks and stored in the international gene banks like IRRI or the National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resource in New Delhi, which is the National Gene Bank. They don't contain many of these hundreds of varieties that we have collected from tribal areas. So that's a massive extinction episode. Also, next one, please. On the animal side, the United Nations FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, which is this year they published, according to their estimate, 159 cattle breeds all over the world have gone extinct over the last 50 years. 107 breeds, pure breeds of sheep have gone extinct. 101 breeds of horses and 70 breeds of pigs have gone extinct. These are the most prominent ones. And there are many of the chicken breeds, for example, 30 chicken breeds are extinct all over the world. And they conclude, this FAO study concludes, some breeds may have become extinct without being even ever documented. So before documentation, they went extinct. That's also possible. So that is again because of the homogenization of the genetic diversity, homogenization of the species diversity on Earth. Next one, please. And then on the contrast, currently, I'm not talking of the past, but even this present indigenous people, what Professor Madhav Gadgil calls ecosystem people who live with ecosystem in enshrined in ecosystem. They use the ecosystem for their livelihoods every day. The forest people, for example, and they maintain many of these sacred species, sacred groves, sacred ponds. They observe many of these customary regulations over harvesting. Next one, please. And there are many kinds of species which are considered sacred. They never harvest them. So in many cultures, all the indigenous cultures all over the world on the 5 continents, they maintain many of the species, sanctify them, which must not be damaged, must not be killed. Next one, please. So there are sacred groves, sacred heronry. So there are certain sites which are never disturbed to allow these herons, the birds, to nesting and breeding. And although it's in the midst of a hunter-gatherer village, they actually kill the birds, but never touch them, never disturb them during the breeding period. So in order to sustain their resource base, the prey base for posterity. Next one, please. Is one sacred grove that I worked there, and we identified many of the uh, endemic trees, endemic trees and endemic animals. In many sacred groves, the last populations of certain endemic flora and fauna are still existing only in the sacred groves. Next one, please. So one example is that this tree that uh, I rescued from extinction from one single sacred grove, and that is now destroyed by development. So I rescued this by tissue culture in my lab, and it's now planted in. But that was rescued only from one single sacred grove, the last specimen of the tree. It's Vitex glabrata. Next one, please. And then we have another example of an endemic species of frog, which is not found elsewhere in the world, nowhere else in the world, which was identified in the Moflong sacred grove in Meghalaya, which is very famous sacred grove. So these are the examples of endemic and critically endangered flora and fauna, which are found only in the sacred groves maintained by the native people for thousands of years. Next one, please. This is one unique sacred pond in North Bengal, and you can see this in the foreground. This is a very common turtle, Indian soft-shell turtle. In the background is Chelonix nigricans, and this is the last population in mainland India. There's another population in Meghalaya. Only these 2 ponds contain this particular species, which means Those two ponds, one in Meghalaya and one in this pond in North Bengal, are the last habitats of this species. They are not found elsewhere in the world. So that's the value of the sacred ponds and sacred groves, again maintained by the native people. They don't kill them, they don't eat them, they don't disturb them. The entire habitat is sacred. Next one, please. We have this, these are the hunter gatherer people who are rescuing these birds. Student rescued these birds from injury they fell from this tree. Next one, please. And they rescued bats also. So that's kind of biophilia, love and respect for nature, which is still inherent in these native people, not destroying them, not killing them gratuitously. And then this is another example of modern farmers. One farmer, this was the traditional variety on the left, the white grain, and he developed from that variety, he by selection of one single mutant, he developed this red rice. And encouraged by this activity, this farmer's son, who's a teenager, he identified another unique mutant and he developed another pure line of black rice from the same stock. So it's a teenager boy's innovation. So that means they continue to create this, they add to this genetic diversity of the same rice variety, and it's still continuing. It's not just in the past, it's still continuing the spirit of innovation and addition to biodiversity, in this case the genetic diversity of rice. Next one, please. Now, that's the question for all the viewers. Now, you have to decide which group of human you think is responsible for ecocide and loss of biodiversity. Is it the entire human species, you and I, or some other group of humans? Thank you very much for your patience. I hope I have not exceeded the time limit.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deb. I think we had we still have a little bit of time to take a few questions. I'll
Sure.
quickly go to the questions. So the first question is from Rajan Dev. Science is needed to protect and increase biodiversity, but it is in the name of science that modernization happened, which destroyed biodiversity. What change we need to modern science? In other words, science causes the problem which it then solves. And then, um, you know, in a sense, how does one break this destructive
Okay.
cycle?
Yeah. Very interesting question. Uh, a very simple answer is that no, science by definition is the body of knowledge or a method of knowing thing, method of finding the truth. That is nothing to blame. You know how it happened, where it happened, what's the cause behind it. That is not to blame for any destruction of creation, because creation of a diversity is also a science. But what is responsible here is there's a misuse is technology. There is a the big difference between science and technology. So when we say this, the electric bulb or nuclear bomb are the fruits of technology, but science of how the nucleon atoms operate, how the electricity goes, that's a science. So that knowledge per se is not destructive. How you apply to industry, when particularly in the case of industry. And when we talk about technology, we actually mean the industrial technology, modern technology at a large scale, which is controlled by an esoteric agency. So when we talk about the plowshare, it's also a technology. Okay, minimal technology. When you talk about a horse cart or bullock cart, is also a technology because it contains wheels and many of these axles, etc. But that technology is not destructive because it's controlled, it's controllable, and it's a very small scale. Is in the same community. When a tractor replaces this horse cart or bullock cart technology, then it goes beyond the control of the community. You have to depend on a factory, engineers. Even for repairing, you have to depend on an external agency, a repairman, which is not in your community. the material, the energy, everything. The fossil fuel is not coming from your own community. You have to depend on this. There, this modern technology is not the science per se, but technology is the one. So we have to make this now the technology which is pro people and controlled by the community. Then only it can have this, the real modern science appropriately applied for the benefit of the people.
Okay, there's a question from Gagan Das. What about certain species that we actively want to eliminate, such as viruses?
Okay. We actually cannot eliminate a single species of viruses or the pathogens. I mean, despite all these centuries of attempts of medicine, we have not been able to eradicate a single virus or bacteria or even worms, whether it's flatworm or ringworm or whatever. They are there because they have co-evolved with humans and other animals. The pests that we have eliminated, we have actually eliminated many pest, so-called pest insects and many plants, but that's not because of the medicinal things, medicinal science. It's because of the technological impact of the chemical technology. So uh, if there were many kind of chemical warfare against virus, it's possible, but with medical science, we have not yet eradicated. And it's rather, evolutionary biologists say that it's always desirable that in humans, I mean, all animals should have a load of uh, parasites, whether it's bacteria or virus or whatever, because that creates a finer and finer levels of immunity, which refines and improves our genotypes. So therefore, even the human evolution has also been, not only human, all animals evolution, majority of this has been exacerbated and refined and modified by parasitic evolution. It's the co-evolution of parasite and host. So we cannot eliminate them altogether. But of course, the non-parasitic animals in the food webs, like pest insect, for example, they can be, but again with limited. Like for example, we have not yet been able to eradicate mosquitoes. We have not been able to eradicate the cockroaches, uh, despite all the chemical warfare. They have become more and more resilient to any kind of things. So uh, the point is how to, without eradication should not be the goal of civilization. The goal should be how to live healthily in a healthy environment without eradication. It's a coexistence uh, for millennia. That should be the goal.
Thank you, Doctor. Then there's a question: can we continue industrial development while at the same time preserving biodiversity? In other words, is the answer to the biodiversity challenge to reverse or stop development? In other words, is development always at loggerheads with this whole juggernaut of
Yes, you're
development?
very right. You have actually got the problem at its head. I mean, you cannot have have the fruit and eat it. So we cannot say that we need. We'll enjoy all this, the AC. We'll always ride the AC car, and we'll have this all kinds of gas guzzling things and concrete development on the multi-storied concrete things. And at the same time, we cannot hope that our city will be filled with beautiful birds and beautiful lizards and all, and we'll have on Sundays we'll enjoy our on the balcony, sitting in the balcony, we'll find peacocks and birds and animals living there. We have to make this adjustment with that. This mainly the techno urban civilization, we have to draw a limit up to what extent. So that is very difficult. I mean, it's much easier to say than to do, but we can at least start thinking. I mean, many people have started thinking. And in Europe, for example, there has been many cities called transition towns. They are in existence already. Unfortunately, in India, in South Asia, nobody is thinking about that. Nobody knows about that. It's a silent revolution going on in six countries in Europe, and also in pockets of USA. They are towns, but it's transition town in the sense that they have shunned almost 100%, in some cases it's 50%, in some cases 80% of all fossil fuel. Nobody uses fossil fuel. They are importing bicycles, they are importing cycle rickshaws from Japan for transportation. They're using, zero chemical agricultural production for their own food, reducing the food mileage. They're not importing any of this food that comes from outside. By So there are many ways they are making this. So these are really viable ways, and they have been acknowledged by United Nations to be extremely sustainable societies. If that is possible in Europe, the citadels of development, why can't we do that in our own country? So it's simply the mindset and the ability to question, and then human imagination has no limit. We can always imagine different ways of this instead of accepting everything as given and the only way. So I always tell people that there's a dangerous viral disease of the brain called TINA syndrome. There is no alternative. Once people accept there is no alternative, what is given is the only way, then of course we are doomed to extinction. So we have always to challenge this, the status quo, and then definitely our imagination, human species imagination, will hold sway over reality.
Thank you so much. There's a question from Zoha. Great presentation, Dr. Deb. Do you think India had an alternative to meeting its food security needs at the time of initiating Green Revolution?
At the time of initiating, yes, of course. Uh, there's been many studies, including Dr. Richaria, and our own studies actually indicate that it was not necessary at all to promote this green revolution, because over the past 10 years, there has been a series of studies which actually show that the hyperbole of impending famine, crushing food resource security and so on, was actually hyped up by, it was a completely political thing. The the so-called impending famine in Bihar because of the drought condition in 1965 was hyped because at the same time the British journalists couldn't find any sign. But then there was a kind of, you can say, hand wringing, the political hand wringing, for which we had to accept the PL 480 aid from USA with US aid. And to promote that, we had to accept that one, without which we couldn't prosper with that. So that was a kind of political dimension rather than agroecological and real ecological dimension. So even today, the fallacy of this green revolution is that uh, over the past, say, a few centuries, I'm not talking of thousands of years, just for a few centuries, there was no farmer's suicide because of uh, no slow development in growth or yield. But we have, over the past 20 years, 15 years, total 80,000 farmers have committed suicide according to government's own estimate for agricultural reason, not for non-agricultural purposes. For agricultural purpose alone, whether it's farm price was not adequate or the production was failed and so on, 80,000 farmers committing suicide in 15 years is unprecedented result of the 60 years of green revolution. If it food security means the committing of suicide of the food producers themselves, how can we say it's food security? And the other study is that all these according to this past 5 years, every year our food and agriculture minister always says, it's no secret, they declared that India is self-sufficient in food, and you have this in stock government warehouses. We have enough food to feed the entire population, even if there is no production in the next year. Okay, despite that, we have this food prices abundantly high. uh, but at the same time, the farmers are not getting this food price altogether. You remember a couple of years ago in Maharashtra, the price of eggplant came down to 30 paisa per kg. In Odisha, 5 years ago, the tomato price became 20 paisa per kg. So the farmers committed suicides and they destroyed. So because of the bumper production of the crop, the food price became low for the farmers, not for the consumers, and that led to the disaster. Is that the kind of food security that Green Revolution wanted to achieve? So if that is the one, then green revolution has failed to achieve this, the attain for the producers themselves, uh, if not for the urban reach. So that's the answer. And until that time, there was no such former suicide in mass by thousands and thousands every year. That's never the case.
Okay, there's a question from Caroline. I really appreciated your point about the need to differentiate which humans are actually responsible for biodiversity loss. What then do you think of terms like the Anthropocene that imply blame towards humans in general?
Exactly. I mean, that is the term that I was inveighing against throughout my lecture. We cannot blame humans as a species, not all humans. We have to specify which part of human, what's the cartel of industry, what are the individuals who actually benefit from this development at the expense of biodiversity at different levels. Once we identify that, then we stop blaming that no, all humans are to be blamed. That was the main emphasis of my presentation. We have to rethink about that. It's not just the humans all. It's not you and I who are actually killing animals.
How do ecological systems respond to chronic anthropological disturbances? This is a
uh,
question from Perisimil Kaur.
Please repeat the question once again, the first
How
sentence.
do ecological systems respond to chronic anthropological disturbances?
Oh, uh, in ecological theory, this is there are two types of disturbances, whether it's anthropogenic or not. It could be natural disaster too, like a cyclone or earthquake or volcanic eruption. These are also disturbances. Now, there are two kinds of disturbances. One is called a series of slow process of disturbances, like uh, gradually rising temperature is one, very slowly. And the other one is pulse perturbation. That is, in one go, you have a disaster like a volcanic eruption. In one day, you get this, the entire island swept off. What happened with the Kakatua Island? So, in the case of this pulse perturbation, that is a sudden extinction of these, uh, like what happened with the meteorite, one strike of meteorite in the Jurassic period, and all the dinosaurs went extinct with that impact. Ecosystem cannot recoil, cannot adapt to that. But for and similarly with this, the sudden rise in carbon dioxide and nitrogen oxides and ammonia and all the greenhouse gases rising within 50 years or 100 years, and this massive extinction of mass extinction that's going on at the scale of 1000 to 2000 times higher than the background rate of extinction. This is cause of pulse perturbation. Ecosystems cannot adapt to go back to its original state at all. So that means the resilience is lost. So once the ecosystem where we live in, that is the life support system of ourselves, is lost, then we are all doomed to extinction. It's not that it cannot be that all the species will go extinct and only humans will survive. Impossible, because we are a part of nature. As I said in the beginning, it's not us versus nature. It's not us above nature, because we are inherently a part of this same natural resource that we have to rely on. So far, we have not been able to produce one single dot of food which is not coming from nature. Okay. So we have to breathe oxygen. We have to eat this biodiversity, whether it's plant or animal. It cannot be just a few salts that we survive on. Therefore, for our own sake, it's a very kind of ulterior motive. For our own sake, very selfish motive, own survival, we have to retain the life support system on Earth, our own ecosystem, and we cannot say, I cannot hope that we'll anthropogenically we can make a pulse perturbation and still then the ecosystem can recoil and will survive. That's not possible. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Deb. This is the last question which we will take due to lack of time. This is from Yogita. She says, does species diversity follow any pattern?
Species diversity. I don't exactly get the exact point of the question, but you mean the pattern of species extinction, you mean, or pattern of species
Does
evolution?
species diversity follow any pattern?
Uh, I don't quite get the meaning of that. Diversity has is a very wide term. As I described, the diversity means biological diversity has a species level, genetic level, ecosystem level. But if you are focusing only on species, it is actually decided and directed by natural selection of evolution. So evolution doesn't have a fixed pattern. This is what exactly the natural evolution technically it's called it is not it's not directed, not goal directed, that eventually there will be a superhuman or super animal with lot of brain, lot of intelligence, or lot of strength, whatever. That's not this is not It's not goal. There's no goal at all. It only evolves. The species or these organisms evolve according to their own environment of survival, and whichever trait enables them to survive best will survive, and then will create progeny. So the number of progeny will increase of those individuals who can adapt best to that particular type of environment. So in one case it could be high temperature, in another case it would be cold temperature, low humidity, high humidity, and so on and so forth. We don't know what exactly would be the outcome after several thousand years. It cannot be predicted because evolution by definition is not goal directed. So therefore there's no fixed pattern on it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deb, for this really enlightening and stimulating presentation, and for sharing your thoughts, which I'm sure all the participants who are on the uh, lecture, participating in this discussion today have really benefited from, but also the recording of this lecture will be shared through our YouTube channel with a larger audience. Thank you again for your generous offering of time. Unfortunately, I know there are more questions than we could answer, but because of the limitations of time, we will have to end. I would also like to thank our participants who are joining us on Zoom and on Facebook for their thoughts, their comments, their questions. And we look forward to meeting
Yes.
you all again for our next lecture. Thank you, Dr. Dev.
Thank you, Professor. I'm really grateful there for giving this opportunity to interact with many other very bright audience. And I would also because as you said, the time was constrained. So, but I'll be very happy to respond to any questions if it's directed to me or either on Facebook or my email. So I'll try to answer any of the questions.
Definitely, definitely. So we will share the questions with you that
Excellent.
we receive from the participants. Thank you again.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Namaskar to everyone. Thank you. Yeah.